Keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon, and I am pumped up to be here today talking some sports with the great listeners of this network. We are going to dive into all things football on this podcast. We are now less than a month away from training camp, and it's time to get excited. Let's have some fun. I know there's a lot of questions going on in just the sports, in not just the sports world, but the world as a whole. And a lot of people are worried that we might not actually get a football season. And trust me, I'm right there with you. I will go into a full-on depression if we don't get some football. So we will dive into that at some point on this podcast, but not here today. Today, we're going full speed ahead, all right? We're acting like we're going to have an NFL season. We need to stay positive. We need to have hope. And the best way to do that is to talk some real football, baby. I mean, if you look at it, there's some real positive momentum flowing in the sports world right now. We have NBA getting ready to head down to their bubble, which I like to call pretty much a glorified summer camp for those NBA players. We have Major League Baseball starting back up. Hockey is getting going. I'm in the great state of North Carolina right now, and the Carolina Hurricanes started practicing a couple days ago. So we see the positive signs, and we want to keep that momentum going until we are told otherwise. Today we're going to dive into some real storylines going on inside the painted lines of a football field. We're going to dive into some exciting topics that I think you listeners will really enjoy. We're going to start off the show today with the big headline of the week. Everyone knows about this. The New England Patriots, they did it again. They went out and signed former MVP, former Heisman Trophy winner, former national champion Cam Newton. I'm going to talk about what does this signing mean for all parties involved, all right? What does this mean for the New England Patriots? What does this mean for Cam Newton himself? And what does this mean for the AFC East? That's right, Jets, Dolphins, Bills fans. I know how you're feeling. You're feeling worried. You're scared. You're thinking, here we go again. But should you feel that way? I'm going to let you know, and I think you just might like what I have to say. After that, we're going to dive into the NFL and the recent decision that was made to cancel the first two preseason games. Now, we're not going to dive into what that means for the season going forward in terms of are we going to have a season or not. Remember, we are staying positive here. We hopped on the positive train and we're not jumping off. So instead, we're going to talk about what that means for your team. Yeah, you listening out there. Does the cancellation of the first two preseason games affect your team in a negative way? Or does it actually have a positive effect? We will discuss it right here on the podcast. After that, we're going to head down to Packerland. That's right, the big Lambeau Field. Brett Favre recently had some interesting comments about first-round draft pick Jordan Love that they drafted back in April. We will dive into those comments and also talk about the Packers organization as a whole. And we'll get into some really interesting conversations with that. And then this is the best part right here, guys. To wrap up the show, we're going to do something fun. We're going to do something special for you. We're going back to school. And, set in your best Billy Madison voice right there. Back to school, back to school. All right, I'm going to stop there before I embarrass myself more. But we're going to go back to school, and I'm going to hand out some grades. I'm going to dish out a grade to every organization that made a QB transaction this offseason. Did your team sign a new QB this season? We'll stick around to see if they passed or not. And that's something fun we'll do at the end of the show here, so definitely stay tuned for that. Now, but first, it all starts with the New England Patriots, like always. They did it again. They did what everyone not in the state of Boston didn't want them to do. They signed Cam Newton, but they didn't just sign him. They signed him for pennies on the dollar. And we will get into what that means in a minute. But first, I want to start here. I've heard a lot of people say the Patriots got one on us again. They made us all think. They made us all think they're going to roll out Jarrett Stidham for the season, and then last second, boom, they bring in Cam Newton. Yeah. And that is what happened here. But let's stop acting like this was their plan from the beginning. The Patriots have patience. They run their organization better than anyone in the league. They are confident in who they draft and who they bring in through free agency. And because of that, they don't feel the need to make a rash decision and bring in a QB the moment free agency begins. They didn't see Cam Newton get dropped from the Panthers back in March and then say, okay, so what we will do now is we will wait until June 28th because no one else is going to want the former MVP, and then we will sign him for $1 million. They aren't psychics. They can't predict the future. That's not what happened. What happened is they said this. Cam Newton, very interesting prospect. Someone that has played well against us. Someone that is actually 2-0 against Bill Belichick in his career. Someone that Bill Belichick has always given high praise to. So let's keep our eye on him. Let's see what happens in free agency. Let's see the amount of money he is asking for. And maybe down the road, if he is still available for a good price, maybe we can get him there. I don't think that they thought he would still be available and they would be able to get him for this price. And guess what? They probably thought, and if he does go sign with another team right away, well, then that is totally okay because we are confident in the players we draft. We are confident in our system, in our coaching, in our philosophy. And because of that, we're not going to bring in a quarterback for a large amount of money because we just simply don't need to do that. Okay? So I just wanted to get that out of the way first. Because I just hear so many people saying they tricked us, they did it to us again. Look, they did end up signing him. And it is a big, oh, come on, the Patriots, Cam Newton, like that would happen. But it's not like it was a big masterful plan that just went step by step for them. They're so confident in their organization and they're such a good organization that they're able to have patience like this, which other franchises are not. So I wanted to get that out of the way first. You hear all the time, they did it again, they outsmart everyone, and it's not that. They just outclass everyone. They created a process and they stick to it. They don't budge off that process because there's a shiny new toy out there. So they waited, and their patience ended up paying off for them in a tremendous way. Not only did they sign Cam Newton, but they signed him for a guaranteed contract of $550,000. To put that into perspective real quick, let me just read you some of the QB names that have a higher guaranteed contract going into this 2020 season, okay? Matt Barkley makes $600K. Jarrett Stidham makes $634K. Matt Schwab, that's right, Matt Schwab. I'm a big Falcons fan. He's still in the league, and he can play, but he makes $750,000. Ryan Finley makes $790,000. Will Greer makes $822,000. Brett Hundley makes $888,000. Mason Rudolph makes $923,000, and Robert Griffin makes $2 million. Now listen, I'm not knocking any of these QBs. They're all in the NFL for a reason. They all have talent. But we're talking about Cam Newton here. And the New England Patriots just got him for $550,000 guaranteed. Now he can make up to $7 million in incentives. And if he does pass all those incentives, that is still nothing. And it is still pennies on the dollar for a quarterback like that. Now, we ask ourselves, what does this signing mean? What does this signing mean for the Patriots? What does it mean for Cam Newton? What does it mean for the AFC East? Let's dive deep into this signing, okay? What are the Patriots getting when they sign Cam Newton? Let's start with diving into what we know for sure. Let's look at the things we know about the Patriots as a team. Some truths. We know that they don't have very many skill position players. That's just fact. That there's not a serious threat when it comes to their wide receivers. I would actually go far enough to say that they have one of the worst receiving cores in the league in terms of star power and depth. I mean, they have Julian Edelman, who has had an amazing career and actually could be argued for a Hall of Fame career. But let's state the obvious. He's getting older. They have Mohamed Sanu, and as a Falcons fan, I loved Sanu. I was so salty when we traded him away. But he is best when he has guys like Julio Jones taking most of the attention. The Patriots clearly don't have that type of guy on their team. They didn't draft a receiver in the draft this year, so we know they are going to be limited in that regard. All right. Now, they have a great run game. They always have a strong O-line, even though Dante Scarnecchia is retiring, who's like the greatest offensive line coach in the history of football. Investing in the O-line, though, is something Bill will always do. That is a extremely important position to Bill Belichick, and it should be to every coach. But Bill takes that serious. So we know they're going to have a good run game, and we know that they're going to have a good offensive line. They have Sony Michel as a running back who had a phenomenal rookie year when he came out of Georgia. He took some steps back last year, he did, but he still looks like he is going to be a good back in this league. They also have James White, who in my opinion is one of the best pass-catching running backs in the league. So they have a good tandem of running backs. The problem with the Patriots last year was this, though. They were too predictable. They were way too predictable. Well, you say, Kayvon, what are you talking about? It's the Patriots. Their offensive system is one of the hardest to learn. Well, they had Tom Brady, right? But Tom Brady isn't an athletic quarterback. He isn't. He just isn't going to give you anything with his legs. His legs don't scare defenses. He beats you with his accuracy. And boy, does he have some accuracy. But the problem was, when the Patriots had Sony Michel in the backfield last year, you can pretty much go ahead and book them in on a run play. And you can go back and look at it. I watched the film. When they had Sony Michel in the backfield, they were running the ball about 99% of the time. And the defenses knew that. And then when they would bring in James White in the game, they were passing the ball. They were way too predictable. And even though they went 12-4, that ended up catching up to them towards the end of the season and in the playoffs. So that's one truth that we know. Now, another truth that we know about the Patriots going into this season is they will have a top 5 defense in the league. We know that for sure. As long as they have a coach named Bill Belichick there, you can pretty much edge that into stone. That's where Bill makes his mark, and he is not going to allow for his defense to be the issue on the team. And so what does that mean exactly? Well, it means you win games for the Patriots by not turning over the ball, by not putting his defense, Bill Belichick's defense, in a bad situation. That is a key. One thing we know that Bill Belichick will not tolerate is turning the ball over. He will not stand for it. Tom Brady was so good at doing that. at making sure he didn't put his defense in a bad situation. And that's why they went 12-4 last year. Do you guys remember in the beginning of the season? I mean, we were talking about this could be one of the best defense we've ever seen in the NFL, in the history of the league. I mean, they were scoring more touchdowns on defense than they were on offense. So you keep that defense in a good position. You don't let them get in a hole. You don't put them in a bad position. And then we know they will be a top 5 defense, if not the best defense in the league. So those are some facts that we can say we're pretty confident is going to happen going into the 2020 season for this Patriot team. Now, obviously, the receiver can change. You know, if they make a big trade or if they somehow brought Antonio Brown, I don't see that happening after the way things ended. But that can change. But at this moment, you know, that's what we're looking at here. Now, let's enter in Cam Newton to the conversation. You enter in Cam Newton, who is a dual threat quarterback, opposite of the QB that they've had for the last 20 years. Now, we obviously know health is an issue. Everyone knows that in this conversation. Everyone listening to this podcast, you know football. And we all know that with Cam Newton, there's always going to be a question about his health. I mean, let's just be real. He probably would still be on the Panthers if there wasn't. So let's put that aside for the sake of this conversation. Let's look at it from the lens of Cam Newton is going to be healthy this season. The stars are aligned, and Cam Newton has a full, healthy season. What does this team look like? You take out Tom Brady, and you enter in Cam Newton. What do you get? You get a better team. Now, I understand everyone is going to sit there and say, what is this guy saying that on his first podcast, on his first show with this network, that Cam Newton is better than Tom Brady? That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying that this team, this 2020 Patriot team, the way they are constructed right now is better suited for a dual threat QB like Cam Newton than an immobile, unathletic Tom Brady. Even if they don't change up the system, Cam Newton is a better fit for this team. But they will change up the system. They will have to, you know, if they want to maximize all of Cam's talent, they're going to have to change it up, and they will change it up. Tom Brady, I believe, will have a phenomenal, he might even have an MVP season with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So at no point am I saying that Tom Brady has now lost his edge because he's gotten older and he's not a good QB. He's going to be a fantastic QB this year. And I think he might even have a better season than Cam Newton. But for this team, Cam Newton is a better fit for the run blocking they do, for the run schemes they run, for just them wanting to be an old school power running game. The predictability factor will go away when you have a quarterback like Cam Newton that can scare the defense at any time because of his legs. And not to mention can also throw the ball pretty well. I have heard a lot of people out there say, well, Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels are stubborn and they don't want to change up their system. They want to keep the offensive system that they've been running for the last 20 years because that is what they're best at. That thought process, that statement is so far from being correct. The reason why Belichick is such a great coach and the best coach of all time, in my opinion, is because he has no ego. When it comes to the way he is willing to win, he has no ego. I'm not saying he doesn't have an ego. He for sure has an ego. Every coach in the NFL, scratch that, almost every person has an ego, okay? Especially a successful person like Bill Belichick. He doesn't have an ego, though, when it comes to the way he wants to win. He will go out there and beat you 13-3, like we saw in the Super Bowl a couple years ago, or he will go out there and beat you 35-27 in a shootout. It doesn't matter to him. He just wants to get the job done and win. Now, if it's a win in an ugly fashion, he's going to be pissed, and he will show that. but he will be okay with the win. He has no ego when it comes to how he wins. Now, of course, he is a defensive-minded coach, and he takes pride in his defense. So do I think that defensive lockdown win that they had in the Super Bowl against the Rams a couple years ago might have brought out more joy for him? Yeah, I definitely believe that. Especially since the Rams were one of the best offenses the league has seen in many years that year. So I'm sure he took more pride in a win like that. But regardless, he just wants to win, and he's okay with whichever way it happens. So Bill Belichick and Josh McDaniels, they will refine their system to fit Cam Newton's strengths. They will do that. Look at what they did with Jacoby Brissett a couple years ago when Brady was suspended and then Garoppolo got hurt. In comes Jacoby Brissett, and they squeezed in some bootleg plays for Brissett. And they were playing the Colts that night. I remember it like it was yesterday, and the Colts never saw it coming because the Patriots never switch up their system. But they did. They were willing to adapt, and it worked out perfectly. Now, they might not completely revamp their entire offensive system, but what they will do is they'll add wrinkles to it. They will use their running backs. They will use the 2 tight ends that they drafted in the draft this year, and they will create new blocking schemes and new running formations. All of that will happen. Now, this is what I worry about. If Cam Newton starts to throw a lot of interceptions, what happens there? We went over this, but Bill Belichick's not going to be happy. He's not going to be happy with a player that's turning the ball over and putting his defense in a bad situation. Now, I'm not saying Cam Newton is some interception-happy quarterback that will throw interceptions left and right. He's not. But I am a Falcons fan, as I stated, and I have watched him up close and personal twice a year for the last 9 years. And Cam can get a little loose with the ball at times. He's got to learn to throw the ball away. Will we see bickering on the sidelines? I'm sure we will. It's football. It's competitive. These guys want to win. It happens. I don't take anything into the fact that people are talking about, can their attitudes coexist? That's just not an issue in my line. And the reason that's not an issue is this. Both people here have something to prove. And that is the key to all of this. Cam Newton will have a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove to the Panthers that they screwed him over. He wants to let them know that they made a massive mistake for letting him go. He also wants to prove to the league, to all the GMs and the coaches and the owners that wouldn't take a shot on him, that they screwed up, that they made a big mistake. And then Bill Belichick. He has something to prove too. I mean, come on. I said earlier that he doesn't have an ego when it comes to how he wins, but you better believe he has an ego. Just like every other coach and player out there. He wants to prove that he can win without Tom Brady. And that's the $1 million question. That's the $1 million sports radio question, sports podcast question that gets debated all the time for both Brady and Belichick. Can they win without each other? And now we finally get a chance to get an answer to that question. Remember, Belichick got fired from the Browns and then had a losing record with the Patriots before Tom Brady came along. He has something to prove. He wants to show the world that he had a lot to do with that dynasty the last decade or so. So they both have something to prove. So all of this talk that Belichick is going to be stiff, he isn't going to be willing to change his ways, and that Cam is going to come in cocky and not be a team player and try to do everything himself, throw all of that out the window. Throw it out the window. One thing we know about successful coaches and players, and matter of fact, just successful people in general, those people are willing to adapt. They are willing to change because things around them are changing. And sometimes, when they are stubborn and they aren't willing to adapt, well, they end up getting forced into adapting. They end up getting a reality check. And then they realize they have to adapt. Cam Newton, he got that reality check. He got cut. Nobody would sign him. And then he realized then he finally got offered a cheap contract for a former MVP, for a former player of his talents. But he had to take that offer because he had nothing else. And now he gets a chance to show that he's going to be a team player, that he can be successful with the Patriot way. And I think we're going to see a bad Cam Newton. And Belichick, he'll want to show the world, guess what? I got rid of Tom Brady, and not only did I replace him with another quarterback that I've never coached before, but I'm replacing him with a quarterback with a completely different skill set than the quarterback that I've had for the last 20 years. Both players, both people, Coach Belichick and Cam Newton, have something to prove. And that is a recipe for success when you put two people like that together. Now, you heard what I have to say about this marriage, about how I clearly think this is going to work. Cam Newton with the Patriots, like I just said, it's a recipe for a really good team. But the question is, how good? That's the question. That's the question that everyone in the AFC and specifically the AFC East want to know. I get it. Trust me, I have heard all of you out there talking, all the Bills, Dolphins, Jets fans, and also just the people that are tired and hate the Patriots and tired of seeing them win all the time. They want this whole run to be over, and then you see this happen and you're angry, maybe even a little depressed because it looked like things were finally changing, right? Look at it. Towards the end of last year, you saw the Bills go 10-6 and make the playoffs. You saw the Jets go 6-2 to end the season once Sam Darnold recovered from mono. And you saw the Dolphins put together a respectable 5-11 season after the start that they had. You guys remember the beginning of that season? They looked like a JV middle school team out there. But they rallied together and they put together a very respectable 5-11 season behind a fantastic coaching job by Brian Flores. But most importantly, you saw a team in New England, in the New England Patriots, lose when they usually never do. They lost back-to-back home games to end the season when the games really mattered. First, the Dolphins, and then to the Titans in the playoffs. Something that never happens like that in the Belichick-Brady era. And then the biggest news, the icing on the cake. Tom Brady decided to leave and take his talents to Tampa Bay. And that's when you guys finally saw the sun. It's like the sky parted and the sun came out, and it really felt like, here we go. Now it's our turn. The dynasty is over. And then before training camp could even start, the news breaks that a former MVP, a former national champion, is joining the Patriots. It's crushing. I get it. It's kind of like this. Let me give you an analogy here for a minute. And this is for anyone that played high school sports. You might even be able to relate to this, all right? We will use basketball for this example. Say you're a star point guard, You have always been the best on your team throughout middle school. Everything, throughout middle school and all the time you played. And then you get into high school, and there's an upperclassman point guard, same position as you, that everyone loves. He is a beast. He's a beast. Teammates love him. The fans love him. The coach loves him. So you don't get much playing time throughout your couple years. Then you become a junior. Your junior year comes, and he's a senior now. So towards the end of that junior year, you start to really get more playing time because coach knows you're going to be the guy next year. You're going to be the starting point guard. You're going to run this team. So you take advantage of that playing time. And you show to the world, to your teammates, to your coach, that you can ball, that you have some skill too, that you'll do a fine job replacing the senior. So, you have a great end of the year. The senior, he's graduated. So all summer you're working out. You're putting in work. You're getting better. And then next thing you know, your coach calls and says, hey, Kayvon, we have a 5-star point guard transferring in this season. And you just immediately want to put your head down and get mad because this was finally your time. But then you realize you're just as good. You've been putting in just as much work, if not more. You've been adding new pieces to your game. You're ready to take on this challenge. You're the senior now. This is exactly how other teams in the AFC East should feel. Yes, the Patriots will be good. I just went through that whole process with you of why I think they'll be good. But I didn't say how good. All right, this isn't what I used to call the Patriot East anymore. Instead, it's really the AFC East now. This isn't the division where the Patriots won 11 straight years and 15 out of the last 16 years. It's not that division anymore. This isn't going to be where we automatically pencil in 6 wins for the Patriots before the season even starts. Things are different now. The other teams have been adding new pieces. They've been trending their positive direction. The Bills won 10 games last year in Josh Allen's second season as a pro. Now he goes into his third season and you give him Stephon Diggs as another weapon, as another deep threat for a quarterback that has a great deep threat, deep arm, like someone that can throw the ball deep very well. Then you have a phenomenal coach in Sean McDermott who doesn't get the praise and the credit that he deserves. Then you have the Jets. The Jets are now going into Sam Darnold's third year as well, and they have an improved offensive line with left tackle Mekhi Becton out of Louisville, who is one of the most athletic offensive linemen I have seen since Quentin Nelson. They added Brashard Perryman and drafted Denzel Mims out of Baylor. The defense was looking like a top 10 defense when C.J. Mosley was healthy. Le'Veon Bell gets in year 2 of Adam Gase's offense, where he can now finally become more comfortable. And then the Dolphins. They might not exactly be ready to take that next step and really win the division or anything, but they will not be some easy opponent. They're no slouch. It's not just going to be some rollover game. They have a fantastic coach in Brian Flores, who looks finally like the first coach under Bill Belichick's wing that actually becomes a really good head coach. And then you go out and draft a young, talented QB in Tua Tagovailoa. And then you spend money on some key defensive pieces during the offseason. Are the Patriots going to be good? Of course. They have great head coach and a former QB with a chip on his shoulder. Of course they will be good. But every other team in that division has something special going for them too. This division is wide open for the first time in a long time. Also, this is a big deal here. Maybe one of the biggest viewpoints that could and should give the Bills specifically, but also the Jets and many other teams an advantage, and that is the NFL canceling its first 2 preseason games. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to dive into this news. Now that the NFL has announced the first 2 preseason games will be canceled, will the other 2 games follow suit and the entire season get canceled? The entire preseason get canceled? If so, which teams will be negatively affected by this? What about a positive effect? Is your team, you listening right now, could your team actually benefit from no preseason? Stick around, because we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll dive right into it. Is your team going to be affected by this? And if so, which way? This is the GSMC Football Podcast. Find out right after this.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
We are back. You are tuning in to the GSMC Football Podcast, and we want to thank you for listening. I am your host, Kayvon. If you missed the first part of the show, we just talked about the signing of Cam Newton by the New England Patriots and how that signing was a great move for both sides. Both Cam Newton and Bill Belichick have a chip on their shoulder to prove people wrong, and that is always a recipe for some type of success. But the question is, how much success? Do they still rule the AFC East? We just dove into it a bit. But we ended the segment talking about the recent news that the NFL has canceled the first 2 preseason games this season, and the next 2 might follow suit shortly. What does that mean for certain teams this upcoming season? Now, before we dive into that, I want to remind everyone that we have a really fun, awesome segment coming up here shortly to end the show. We're going to be dishing out grades. That's right, me, Kayvon, someone that did not do very well in school, finally gets the chance to become the teacher. And I am going to be giving out some grades to all the organizations that brought in a new quarterback this offseason. And I'm telling you, you do not want to miss that. So that will be coming up in just a bit. Until then, let's dive into this upcoming NFL season. With the first 2 NFL preseason games canceled, and word from many around the league that they might end up canceling the last 2 as well, and not having a preseason at all, how does that affect certain teams out there? Let's first look at it from this standpoint of the fans, all right? From the standpoint of the fans. You know, I'm a fan, you're a fan, because I think this is the easiest thing we can all come to an agreement on. And you know, it's actually pretty funny, but I would say majority of football fans don't really care for the preseason. And I would say this has definitely become more of a trend lately than it was in the past. But every year when preseason comes around, fans are happy. You know, they're happy that football is back on. You know, you get to see the helmets, the jerseys, and then also it means that we're just that much closer to the real meaningful regular season games starting. But in terms of sitting down and actually watching the content, not many people care to do that anymore. You know, week 1 comes around to the preseason, and if you're a fan of a team that just had a high draft pick, or a team that just took a rookie QB, and you know, all summer you were bragging to your fans, to your friends, to your buddies about a player that your team is just gonna, he's just gonna be a beast. You know, oh, we drafted Baker Mayfield, he's gonna kill it. So then, yeah, you know, you tune in to watch that first preseason game because you want to see what he does. You want to see if you're right. You want to see what your team's getting. But even then, you really don't get to see much. I mean, you have those anomaly years when someone like Dak Prescott plays a lot in the preseason and shows exactly what he can do. But that doesn't happen often anymore. You know, now many of these coaches, They don't want to run their young coveted players out there because they don't want to risk injury. They don't want to show their plays, tell any of their secrets. So you get to see them for a quarter, maybe even a half, some occasions an entire game, but that's really all you're seeing. So when it comes from the angle of the fan, I don't think that this is a big bummer. Preseason games, they just don't move the needle anymore. This is a trend. It's just that simple. We all know that it was trending towards this way anyways. And then with COVID happening, it just kind of furthered the process. And I wouldn't be surprised now going forward if we are more looking at 2 preseason games a year. Something like that. Now, what about from the standpoint of a team? What does the preseason mean for a team? Can having shortened preseason or maybe even a canceled preseason have a negative effect on a team? Or could we actually learn something from this and see that it could have a positive effect? I believe the answer is both. There's no doubt. Now, let me explain that, okay? Because you can have it both ways for sure. There is no doubt that canceling the preseason entirely, or even shrinking it to 1 or 2 games, will have a massive effect in a negative way on many teams. But you can also point to certain teams and say, they don't need a preseason. It totally depends on your organization, where your organization is at this moment, in terms of their roster, their head coach, their quarterback, their depth. First of all, this isn't going to be a conventional preseason. Players aren't going to be practicing as much because of the social distancing and all that. So some guys are going to be out of shape. And we all know that football is a sport where if you're not in shape, not only will you get smoked out there, but you also have a higher chance of getting injured. And nobody wants to see injuries. Nobody wants to see that. So I think that is why the NFL decided to shrink it down to 2 preseason games instead of canceling it altogether. But there are reports out there that the NFLPA, the Players Association, they want to cancel the preseason entirely. They want to cancel it altogether, which absolutely makes zero sense to me. Look, I just told you as a fan, I don't care for the preseason, but I understand why we have it. Without a preseason, how can you have anybody, especially some of these new coaches and these new faces in new places, not have any dry rehearsals going out there before they play? You can scrimmage with your team during training camp. That's great and all, but that's not a real run-through of a game. That's what the preseason is for. Now, having 4 run-throughs it's not necessary, but 2 makes sense. If you notice in the past, usually the first couple of regular season games are pretty sloppy because all these teams are jumping right into full speed and it takes some time to get things going. If you have these teams jump into full speed without any dry rehearsals, without any preseason practice games, the football is going to be unwatchable in some cases. Especially the teams with new coaches and new QBs and new players. I mean, it's just going to be mistake after mistake after mistake. So when you look at how does the preseason affect a franchise? And I said earlier, it can affect it both ways, in a positive or a negative way. The reason I say that is because I think it completely has to do with the team that you're personally cheering for. If you're a fan of the Seahawks or the Ravens or the Chiefs or the 49ers for the next couple years here, they'll look like they're going to be a pretty prominent team. You really don't care as much. You don't really care about the preseason, and I don't think you should. I mean, the only thing the preseason presents for those teams is an opportunity for one of your relied upon stars, the big name stars that you love watching every Sunday, Monday, or Thursday. It gives them an opportunity to get hurt. And no fan, I don't care what team you like, what team you don't like, nobody wants to see injuries. The sport of the NFL, the sport of football, does better when all the star players are healthy. Cam Newton, we just talked about it. The NFL does better when Cam Newton is in the game, when Cam Newton is in the NFL. And with him having a Patriots jersey on, my goodness, that is something else. You know, that people in this world, they love a villain. They love a team to hate against. They love a team where that you can say, gosh, I don't want that team to win. Then you put a guy like Cam Newton on that team, you get star power. Odell Beckham Jr. Remember a couple preseasons ago, he got hurt. That's a waste. You don't want to see these players get hurt. And it happens every single year. Every single year we have this conversation. I mean, offensive linemen, especially once the team starts cutting down, you know, as you go deeper and deeper into the preseason, getting closer to the regular season, you start cutting down the roster. We all know, we watch Hard Knocks, you see how they do that live, and it's tough to watch. You know, they call the players in their office. Well, offensive lineman is a position few and far between. All right? I mean, GMs, coaches, owners, they have a hard time evaluating offensive linemen. It is hard to find a really good offensive lineman. You don't find that many in college because it's a hard position to play. You know, think about it, you have guys like Aaron Donald and Grady Jarrett running at you. It's really hard to find good offensive linemen. So you bring a bunch into camp, you roll them out there for preseason, and then as you start to cut them, your prominent, your main offensive lineman's the one that we all know about from our teams, you know, the big names, the starting five, the starting left tackle, center, left guard, right guard. Those offensive linemen, they have to start playing in these preseason games then. And that could end up bad. You know, God forbid the second or third preseason game, your star right tackle or your star left tackle goes down with an ankle injury. It's that simple. I mean, they are running backwards every time they snap the ball. One twist and it's bad. So, I mean, it happens every year, you know, to some team. We always talk about it. So if your team is well constructed and you're just raring up for the regular season, then the preseason serves nothing for you other than getting your body up to speed for a full hard contact game. And yes, that means a lot. I'm not going to lie, okay? I'm not saying like that's something we should minimize, okay? You know, football is a hard game. It's a fierce game. But you don't need to put these teams through 4 games to do it. So I don't think you get affected by that much for those teams, you know, for those Seahawks, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the 49ers for the next couple years. So now let's go get down to the brass tacks here, all right? Let's get down to the people that are listening that says, well, what about my team? Because you're naming some great organizations here, but that's not my team. So what about my team? What are you saying about my team here, Kayvon? Well, let's get down to it. Let's talk about it. We just discussed that if your organization is a steady organization, the preseason is pretty much a wash, a waste of time, a necessary evil to an extent, you could say. So we all know that. So let me give you a couple teams that are in the opposite boat. Some teams that I believe will adversely be affected without a preseason. Okay? So I've got the Bears, the Chicago Bears. Because that's going to be a legit quarterback battle. I think we all believe that. I think most people believe that Nick Foles and Mitchell Trubisky, they'll be fighting for the starting job in camp. By the way, coming up in a couple segments here to end the show, as I mentioned earlier, we're doing grades for QB transactions. And yes, you guessed it, the Chicago Bears are going to be one of those teams that I'm going to be giving out a grade to. So you're going to hear about that in just a little bit. Was signing Nick Foles a good deal? I don't know. We'll see. But listen, either way, they clearly have admitted that they made a mistake on Mitchell Trubisky, and they brought in a Super Bowl MVP in Nick Foles. That's a quarterback battle. I don't care what anybody says. And if you don't have a preseason to let them battle it out, then how are you going to know who's the starter going into week 1? You're not going to know. And you're probably just going to have to roll out there Mitchell Trubisky since he's the former starter. And that could hurt the team. Because Mitchell Trubisky, he might be the one that should be the starter. But if the team doesn't have a fair QB battle, which, let's be real, what I just said, them bringing in Nick Foles means that there has to be a QB battle. So the team's going to be confused. Who's our leader? Who's our guy? Who's the QB that we have to get behind here? You can battle it out in training camp as much as you want. Anybody that played football or scouted football or has been there watching these training camps, it's not the same as a real run-through of a game. You've got to see it in game content. I also wrote down the Patriots here. Now, usually I would have said their name when talking about organizations that are steady and don't usually need a preseason to get going. But this year is different. They have Cam Newton. They have to create a new system. How can they just give Cam Newton the starting job without having a preseason? There's no way Belichick will do that. He's not going to be okay to do that. This is the Patriots we're talking about here. And this could really put them behind to start the season. That offense is already complicated enough. And then for Cam Newton to be able to have no preseason games under his belt, there's no way that can happen and Bill Belichick will be able to start Cam in week 1. There's just no way. Not with that offense, not with this organization. And especially since Stidham has been there for a full year, already in the quarterback, learning in the quarterback room with McDaniels and Brady, which is a pretty good QB room, I must add, Stidham would end up winning that job. And that's not the best thing for the Patriots for this upcoming season. Look, maybe down the road, Stidham will be a stud franchise QB, but with the lack of weapons, Stidham would be in a tough spot. So this would put the Patriots far behind without preseason games. Just those two. That's all they need, those 2 games. The next team that I think would be negatively affected without a preseason would be the Jets. Now, they don't have a new quarterback, but they have an entirely new offensive line. And you got to get some snaps together for that line to gel. You just can't roll everything out there. That would put Darnold in a tough situation, and I think that's the last thing the Jets want to do. Look, the Jets ended 6-2 last year. If they start the season better and Darnold doesn't get mono, who knows what happens? To start that season better, you got to get that offensive line gelling, and you got to keep Darnold away from whatever he was doing to get mono. It's just that simple. The Redskins are another team that would really be affected without a preseason. Now think about this, all right? Dwayne Haskins needs a lot of reps. I really like Dwayne Haskins coming out of college, but he needs some reps. I want to see what Ron Rivera can do with him. Remember, he brought over Kyle Allen with him from Carolina. Ron Rivera did. If there is no preseason game and a limited amount of practice, I would not be shocked at all if Kyle Allen is the week 1 starter for Washington, just because Allen knows the system. It's not because Allen's better than Haskins. It's not because Ron Rivera likes Allen more than Haskins. It would simply be because Allen knows the system better than Haskins would. And Haskins wouldn't have had time to get the reps under his belt that Ron Rivera or any coach would want him to get under. It's the exact same situation as the Patriots. No one is saying Stidham is better than Cam. But he will know the offensive better, and that matters a lot in the NFL. The New York Giants would be in a tough spot. Without a preseason, you have Daniel Jones with a new head coach in Joe Judge and a new offensive coordinator in Jason Garrett. It's nothing like what Pat Shurmur was doing last year with Daniel Jones. This would be a totally new offense as well, new philosophy. And then also, just like the rest of America, I want to see if Tua can win the starting job for the Dolphins. We all want to see it. We all want to see that battle. We all want to see if he's healthy enough. We want to see the talent that he has on the field. And I'm telling you right now, without any preseason games, you can kiss that goodbye. Especially with his injury concerns, no chance we see Tua. And that makes me sad, I'm not going to lie. I really wanted to see Tua go out there and try and win that job. There's so many more teams out there too. You have the Panthers with a new QB in Teddy Bridgewater, a new head coach in Matt Rule, and a new offensive coordinator in Joe Brady, coming over from LSU last year where they won the national championship. Genius offensive mind. I mean, that is 3 really important pieces. By far the most important pieces on the offensive side of the ball. Those 3 have to be connected. Those 3 have to have reps under their belt. They have to be ready to go. Now, a lot of these teams, they might end up going and just starting their guy anyways. They might. I might be completely wrong about this. But it's going to turn out for an ugly first couple weeks. And in the NFL, you can't get too far behind, even with them adding an extra team to the playoffs. You cannot start the season too far behind. Trust me, as a Falcons fan, I know. Last year we started the season 1-7, we ended 6-2, and we had no shot at even sniffing the playoffs. Even if there was a 7th team available to go into the playoffs last year, we still wouldn't have had a shot. So a lot of teams are going to either look completely different than what we pictured seeing them as, or they're just not going to be very good to start the season. And that is something a lot of us fans might have to start wrapping our head around, as much as it sucks to say. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I am your host, Kayvon Izami. I'm glad you're hanging out with us, listening on this fine day. We are going to take a quick break here, and then when we come back, a big-time legend from Packerland that is also known for his Wrangler jeans commercials made a strong statement about how the Packers should use their rookie draft pick, Jordan Love, this upcoming season. After the break, I will dive into that. And then also coming up a little later, I'm going to start handing out some of those grades that we've been talking about all podcast here. Hand them out, the grades, to all the organizations that acquired a QB this off season. Stick around. We will be right back on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
We are back. This is the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon Izami, and I appreciate you all joining us on this fine day. We have had a lot of fun so far this show. We've got a lot going on still. We're about to dive into Some Green Bay Packer talk. A legend quarterback, Brett Favre, very popular around the Green Bay area and all over the NFL. Now known for his Copper Fit and Wrangler commercials. Has been in the headlines lately. So we'll dive into that. We just finished up talking about the NFL and the crazy possible season that's going to happen this year with the limited preseason. At this point, we're sitting at 2 preseason games. Could it move down to 0? I think there's a very likely chance of that. And we really dove into what's that going to mean for franchises out there, for organizations out there. How's that going to hurt seasons? How's that going to hurt the play of football? And you know, the start of the football year might just be that much more important now, instead of being able to hit your stride a couple games in. So it's going to be very interesting how all that works. And, it's going to just take time to tell. But we dove into that a little bit ago, and that was a fun conversation. But now we're moving forward here. And what I want to talk about, you know, I'm sure most of you have heard the comments made by Green Bay Packer legend, quarterback great, Brett Favre, on Jordan Love. You know, everyone knows Jordan Love is a quarterback out of Utah State that was picked 26 overall by the Green Bay Packers this past April in the NFL draft. Now, before I dive into the comments that Brett Favre made, I want to talk about where the organization is as a whole. And then I'll tie that back into the comments that Favre made, and I'll kind of make it one conversation here. You know, you get everyone that listens to sports talk or sports talk shows or even do things on their own, you know, nothing better than just debating with your friends, talking with your friends, you know, having your own little sports talk radio session whenever you're kicking it with the buddies. So that's always fun. And, you know, I'm sure that this conversation has come up about what are the Packers doing with their organization right now? Why would they make such a move of drafting Jordan Love? And I want to get into the nitty-gritty of it. When it comes to the Green Bay Packers, you know, we all know about this organization and the storied history that they have. You know, we all know about the delicacy of Lambeau Field. We all know this stuff. It's been a top-notch franchise for the better part of their history. There's no denying that. But we also know that when a business, or in this case, an organization, continuously wins, there becomes expectations. There becomes beliefs. That, you know, that this success will happen year after year. And because of that, that might make someone that's in charge of making decisions for that organization or that business jump the gun sometimes, because he or she feels pressure to keep the long history going. And that's exactly what I believe happened here with the drafting of Jordan Love. You know, if you look, Brian Gutekunst is the general manager of the Green Bay Packers right now. He was hired last year, 2018. And if you look at the Green Bay Packers legacy, you know, Ron Wolf back in 1992 traded for Brett Favre when my Atlanta Falcons drafted him in 91, 1 year after he was drafted. Very sensitive topic still as a Falcons fan. Then in comes Ted Thompson in 2005. He then drafts Aaron Rodgers 1 year after he gets the general manager job. And then in comes Brian Gutekunst, and please forgive me if I pronounce that wrong. He then gets, 1 year in, he then goes and drafts Jordan Love. So you see the cycle here. And it almost makes you feel that Brian felt some pressure to keep that going, to keep that that rare process of being able to have a quarterback like that every 10 years of your organization, something that not many organizations are able to say. You know, it's great how the Packers think, okay? The Packers organization thinks the way a successful organization or any business should think. An organization that prepares to stay relevant in the future. They were able to go from one Hall of Fame quarterback to another And they didn't have any years in between where they had down years. Not many organizations are able to say that. Not many organizations can just say, can just let Brett Favre go, one of the greatest QBs to play the game, and then enter in a quarterback that is just as good, if not better, when it's all said and done. And that's what smart organizations do. Look at the New England Patriots. They have Tom Brady. They go out and draft Jimmy Garoppolo. Now, of course, we all know what happens there with that situation, but they're thinking ahead, and that's the point. I mean, if you go back and look at the past Patriot drafts, they are always drafting a quarterback at some point. Now, it doesn't have to be in the first, second, third round, but they're always taking a quarterback because they know that even if they whiff on that quarterback, it's okay. It's not a big deal. But if that quarterback ends up hitting, being something special, then it's a win. It's a huge win. That's why I always am a proponent for franchises drafting a quarterback, no matter what QB you have. But this situation is different. While I applaud the Packers organization for their thinking on the future, this was not done in the best interest of the organization, in my opinion. See, the Packers went and drafted Aaron Rodgers when Brett Favre was giving hints about wanting to retire. Also, they got lucky. It just so happened that Aaron Rodgers fell that year in the draft. You remember, he was supposed to go early in the draft that year. He was a stud quarterback coming out of Cal. He was supposed to go top 5. Some even people thought he could go number 1 overall. But he fell. And I don't know if it's personality, his demeanor, whatever, but he fell to the Packers. And the Packers are a smart organization, so when they realized that this was happening, they took advantage of it. And they did the right thing. That is not what this situation is. And let me explain why. The Packers just went to the NFC Championship game. Yeah, I get it. They got smoked by the 49ers, San Francisco 49ers, in that game. But that was because they didn't have the pieces to match up well with the Niners. And that's why they got smoked twice this season against that Niner team. Sometimes in sports, you run into a terrible matchup. That's what this matchup was with the Packers and the Niners. The 49ers team is built in a way where the Packers team just couldn't keep up with it. Now, it's fixable, and they could have fixed that this offseason by adding more pieces, giving Aaron Rodgers, the great Aaron Rodgers, more pieces, but they didn't do that because they got caught up in worrying about the future, and they didn't realize what the present could still bring them. A championship. You have Aaron Rodgers, arguably the best thrower of the football that the NFL has ever seen. And you only have one championship with him. And I'm not downplaying that. I know how hard it is to win a championship in the NFL. It is the hardest trophy to win in sports, in my opinion. Because every year, a team can go from worst to first like that. And that's why it's so impressive what the Patriots have done over such a long span of time, and even what the Packers have done with winning over a long span of time. But they got caught up in worrying about the future. Sometimes when you're a really good organization, when you're a really smart organization, you're always thinking about the future, right? Like, that's why you're a good organization, because you're thinking, how do we keep this steady profit for companies going? How do we keep winning? And then how do we build on that profit? How do we keep it going? So for the Packers case, you're a winning franchise. You're going to the playoffs every year. How do we keep doing that? Well, you do that by thinking about the future, right? But also, there's something to say about organizations or businesses that think too far into the future. That they start to miss out on what's happening right in front of them. That they start to forget what they have right now currently in the organization. The Packers organization overlooked Rodgers in his prime. They overlooked that Rodgers just took them to the NFC Championship game with pretty much one receiver in Devontae Adams. And that is no knock on their other receivers. But it's just the truth. Davante Adams has had 83 catches last year, and he missed a couple games with turf toe. The second best is their running back Aaron Jones at 49 catches. A team like that should not be making it to the NFC Championship game. But they did, because Rodgers is that great. They also overlooked the great step on that the defense had last year. Last year, the organization went out for once and spent money on real pieces, and it worked out great for them. Their defense was a real solid defense for most of the year. So they overlooked all of that, and then they became enamored with a flashy quarterback out of Utah State. And they jumped the gun. That's just what happened. They were thinking too far ahead. The president of the Packers felt obligated to draft a quarterback because that's what his predecessor did, and that's what the person before that guy did. So he got carried away, and he felt like he needed to make a mark on this organization. When you should have attacked it for winning now. He should have gotten Aaron Rodgers another receiver. He didn't need to go get A.J. Dillon out of Boston College, who A.J. Dillon was an awesome running back in Boston College. I loved watching the ACC, and I watched every single one of his games. He was a phenomenal college running back, and I'm sure he'll be a great running back in the pros too. But they have Aaron Jones, who is a flat-out elite running back in the NFL, and he had a phenomenal season this past year. I had him for fantasy. Trust me, he won me a lot of games. They don't need a running back. They need more Davante Adams. They need more help on the outside. They were one game away from going to the Super Bowl. You don't go out when you have a quarterback in your prime and go spend that pick, that first round pick, on another quarterback that's a project. And that's not a knock against Jordan Love, but that's just what he is. Now, I'm not standing here saying, oh my gosh, we need to chastise the Packers organization for this move, and, this is ridiculous. I understand why they did it. It's just not something that I think they did for the best interest of their organization now. And it might play out perfectly over the future, and they have another Hall of Fame worthy quarterback for the next 10 years in Jordan Love. But you want to get another ring now, and the Packers have done enough good in their organization throughout their time as an organization where you give them a pass on something like this. You say, okay, this doesn't mean that they're going to keep making these types of moves from here on out, and they're going to eventually turn into some irrelevant franchise. No. But I think it is also fair that we are in the sports radio business, and we are in the business of saying our opinion, and when they do something something that we don't think is helpful for the team that they have now, I think it's fair to be able to criticize that. Look, I believe the Packers will be a very good team next year, just like they were this year, because they have Aaron Rodgers, and because they have Aaron Jones, and because they have Davante Adams, and because they have a good defensive line. But I don't think they'll be able to return to the NFC Championship game because other teams are getting better, especially in the NFC and especially on offense. How do you keep up with those other teams when you go throughout the entire draft and you don't even, and free agency, and the only receiver you bring in is Devin Funchess? The offense for the Packers did not get better. I don't care how much you put on Aaron Rodgers' shoulder, the great Aaron Rodgers that he is, and he proved it to us last year, that he's not Superman, that he's not Batman, that he needs some more help. And it was remarkable that he even got him to the NFC Championship game last year as he did. So, the Packers had a chance to go out and do that and give him the help that they needed, and they didn't capitalize on that situation. And now only time will tell what ends up happening from here. Now let's look at the recent headlines that Brett Favre made. Former Packers great, as we all know, Hall of Fame QB, really one of the most fun players to watch. I mean, my Falcons, as we said, they actually drafted him back in the day and then traded him, which is still a very salty subject as a Falcons fan, but it is what it is. So Brett Favre came out the other day to TMZ, and he said this about how the Packers should use Jordan Love. And I quote, I think there's ways to incorporate it, much like Taysom Hill with the Saints. You could use Love as a halfback, the halfback pass, but occasionally let him run it too, just to show that you'll do something like that and keep the defenses on their toes, end quote. This is the problem. This is the problem with Brett Favre's comments. And sometimes I think Brett Favre likes to stay relevant in the news cycle and likes to just talk and say things so his name is still out there. And that's understandable. I totally get that. When you're a great athlete like Brett Favre is, and you're in the limelight 24/7, the spotlight your entire career, once you get out of it, sometimes it's hard to just go back into a normal life. So I get it. There's no knock on that. But he's definitely been out there making some comments lately when it pertains to these comments, though. There's a big issue with what he said, and it's a couple of things. First of all, the Green Bay Packers did not draft Jordan Love to use him that way. I think we can all agree on that. They drafted Jordan Love because he is the predecessor of Aaron Rodgers. He is there to be developed into the next Aaron Rodgers, the next Brett Favre. He is not there to go out and run as an option QB or as a halfback QB or whatever and then possibly risk him getting hurt for the short-term future or the long-term future. And this year, the short-term future is very interesting because when football does happen, there's a high chance that players could get COVID and players could be, that means, your quarterback, the most important position on the field, and I hope the NFL season happens. I hope nobody gets the virus at all. But that's something that these organizations have to think about this year. If Aaron Rodgers was for some reason to get that, they would be in a decent situation because they would have Jordan Love there. Now, I think that is not what the Packers want to do. That they drafted him to play later on, years down the road. They don't want him to come in and play now because that could hurt him. That could ruin him if he doesn't. It could hurt his confidence. There's a number of things about playing a quarterback when they're not ready. And I think they drafted him for the future. So that is one reason right there. Number two, and this is one of the biggest reasons why Brett Favre's comments don't make sense. Taysom Hill was an undrafted free agent, and I think a lot of people forget about this when they look at Taysom Hill. Jordan Love was drafted number 26 overall. Let's look at it from their angle, okay, from the player's angle. Taysom Hill was an undrafted free agent. He just wanted to make a roster. He wanted to make a team. He was going to do that by doing anything that he can. And if that means starting on special teams, that means starting on special teams. And he was able to get a spot on doing special teams with the Saints, and he showed his athleticism. He put in the work. And that slowly started to catch offensive genius Sean Payton's eye. And the genius that Sean Payton is, he realized I have something special here. And he started to throw out packages for him. And Taysom Hill showed up and performed when he got those opportunities. He executed when the opportunity came. But Taysom Hill was willing to do all that because he was fighting to stay in the league. He wasn't drafted. He didn't get a big contract when he came out of college. This league is so hard to make. This league will send you home in the matter of minutes if you don't perform when you get that one chance. And you might not get another one. Taysom Hill understood that, so he did anything he can. Whether it was being on special teams every single time or getting the chance to go in and be a wide receiver and then eventually be in the quarterback position for a couple of downs throughout the game. He did that. I'm not so sure Jordan Love wants to do that. Okay, let's put aside the Packers definitely don't want to use him like that, but let's just put that aside. And let's say maybe they would be willing to. Who says Jordan Love would want to do that? Jordan Love's a first-round draft pick. When you're a first-round draft pick, you get a pretty nice contract. You're not hurting for money. You're also going to get more opportunities and chances because you were taken so high in the draft. That wasn't the case for Taysom Hill. Jordan Love is set up to become, in the future, the Green Bay Packers. One of the historical franchises in the NFL, their starting quarterback. He has that opportunity. Why would he want to go out and run halfback options or wide receiver type routes here and there? Why would he want to risk his body to do that or even risk playing bad when he goes in to do that? He's a quarterback. So that's another angle right there. Then there's this third viewpoint. And I find this the most interesting. Because this isn't specifically even about Jordan Love. It's about anybody in the NFL. Can Jordan Love do what Taysom Hill does? And I'm not saying that as a knock on Jordan Love, okay? Jordan Love, he got drafted 26 overall for a reason. He looks like he can be a future quarterback in this league. He put down some really good stats at Utah State. The question is, who can do what Taysom Hill's role is? How many players in the NFL can do the Taysom Hill role? One. One player is the answer, and it's Taysom Hill. Because if other players could do it, I think they would have been found by now. I mean, these coaches, they're coaches in the NFL for a reason. Now, not everyone is Sean Payton. Not everyone has the ability to instill the type of genius plays that Payton puts in. And the reason why I'm talking so high on Payton is, I like I said it many times already in this show, I'm a Falcons fan. We play the Saints twice a year. I see the type of plays he runs. He is an extremely smart offensive mind. But these other coaches, these other talent evaluators, these other GMs that get paid pretty big bucks by organizations, they would notice if they had another player like Taysom Hill on their squad. So can Jordan Love do the work that Taysom Hill does? We've already talked about why the Packers wouldn't want to do that, and they shouldn't want to do it. We talked about why Jordan Love himself wouldn't want to go out there and do that, and that makes total sense to me. Why should he want to go out there and do that? But if he did, and if the Packers were on board, can he be the threat that actually scares defenses in the first place? Because this isn't about being a quarterback. When it comes to what Brett Favre is talking about, this is about becoming a Swiss Army knife. This is about becoming something that not many people in the NFL can do. Let me read you why Taysom Hill is able to do what he does in the NFL. Taysom Hill played at BYU. He was there from 2012 to 2016. 4 years, 5 seasons. He threw for a total of 6,929 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 31 interceptions. All right? In his 5 years, he ran for 2,815 yards and 32 touchdowns. That's only 9 less touchdowns than what he threw. 32 touchdowns and 2,815 yards. That's incredible. That's some serious athletic ability right there. So when you put that talent with a genius in Sean Payton, with an offense that is already loaded in players like Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, Jared Cook, you have a recipe for success when you run things like that. Many people believe if they kept Taysom Hill in the game, in the wild card matchup against the Vikings, they would have won. I mean, Taysom Hill was causing havoc. He was doing way more damage than Drew Brees was. Taysom Hill is a special type of player in the NFL. He's not a quarterback in my eyes. No. He wouldn't be able to be this feared player if he was playing quarterback every snap of the game. No, but that's not what the Saints use him for. He's here to mix it up whenever they're in a rut. And he does it well every single time. Now you look at Jordan Love. Jordan Love, 3 seasons at Utah State. Not bad at all. I mean, he threw in his freshman year for 4,631 yards, 8 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Then he had a remarkable sophomore year in 2018. 3,567 yards, 32 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. That's a fantastic season. I mean, that is a really, really good college season. All right, then 2019, he dropped off a little bit, but still 3,402 yards, 20 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. And in his 3 years, he ran for a total of 403 yards and 9 touchdowns. Okay? Jordan Love looks like a real quarterback. It's not a Swiss Army knife. It's not even close to what Taysom Hill does. Taysom Hill was not drafted. Taysom Hill was fighting, scratching, and clawing to find a way in the NFL. And he put in the work, and he showed off his athleticism and his skill set. And with a little bit of luck, and let's be honest, a lot of times that happens with sports. With a little bit of luck, winding up with the Saints and with Sean Payton, it worked out for him. So, I just don't see it happening that way for the Packers. I don't see the Packers wanting it to do it. I don't see why Jordan Love would want to do it. And I just don't think it would work out anyways if it did. So I get what Brett Favre is trying to say. I understand that. I just don't think that this is something that is in the best interest for anyone in that organization, as I just eloquently laid out for you. This is the GSMC Football Podcast. I'm your host, Kayvon Izami. We're going to take a quick break, and then it is time. When we come back, we're closing the show out with our favorite segment of the show. We're going back to school, baby. We're giving out some grades, and you're going to want to stick with us and see who passes and who fails right after this break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kayvon Izami, and we're finishing out the show today with our last segment. We're doing something fun. We've been hinting about it all morning, all show. We're going back to school. We're giving out grades. We're passing and we're failing organizations. You know, we talked about Cam Newton at the beginning of the show and the Packers. We talked about some of the Panthers and the Packers as well, so that might be why they're in my head. But we talked about the Patriots signing him. And was it a good signing, you know? And I thought it was, as I explained earlier in the show, the first segment of the show exactly. If you want to go back and listen to it. And I thought it was, but I thought, how good of a signing is it, you know? What does it mean for the AFC East? What does it mean for the rest of the AFC? And that's what got me thinking. This offseason has been so weird. There's been so many quarterback transactions. I was trying to put my finger on it. When's the last time we've had an offseason like this where we've had, I'm talking big name quarterbacks go from one team to another? I can't remember it in my time of watching football. I cannot remember an offseason like this. So I thought, well, let's have some fun with it. Let's put some grades on it. And look, these are all just, we're having fun. I'm not trying to, bash any of these organizations. And these are all NFL organizations. They're great organizations. They have great talent across the board from top to bottom. These quarterbacks are great quarterbacks. But we're in the business of criticizing, and also complimenting. And when a lot of moves are made like this, we got to see how they come out. And time will tell for most of these moves for sure, but just on paper, before the season starts, how do we like these moves, huh? So that's what we're going to do with it. We're going to have some serious fun with it today, and I hope you guys enjoy it because it has been a busy off season. And it's been a pretty crazy, off season with everything going on in sports and the world with the virus. And it's always fun to play some type of game segment like this. And that's what we're going to do here. So let's go to school. Let's get started. I'm going to put my professor glasses on here. You can refer to me as Professor Kayvon for the rest of the show. Just kidding. You don't have to do that. Here we go. All right. I want to start with Jameis Winston going to the New Orleans Saints. Now, in the last segment, we just talked a little bit about the Saints because we were talking about Jordan Love and comparing him to Taysom Hill because that's what Brett Favre did in his comments, So in that segment, you guys heard that I'm pretty high on Sean Payton, all right? I think he's a phenomenal offensive coach. So let's look at it. Why did they bring in Jameis Winston, okay? Think about it. This is the one organization that is going to be carrying 3 quarterbacks 2 years in a row. You don't find many organizations that do that. Last year, they brought in Teddy Bridgewater, and everyone was pretty shocked by that, but they loved it. Teddy was coming off a tough injury. He looked like he had so much promise, and they brought him in just in case, and it paid off. Drew Brees got hurt. Teddy went 5-0 in that span. Teddy proved his worth. He went to Carolina and got a big contract. More on that later because that is an off-season move, and we will give that a grade. So then they bring in Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston going to the Saints, I give a B+. B+. And this is why. And let me be very clear here. If this was with almost any other team, other than a couple out there with really smart offensive-minded coach, maybe like the 49ers and Shanahan, the Rams and McVay, some of those type organizations. If this was with any other organization than those, this would have been a much lower grade. A much lower grade. I've been on record to many people that have listened to me in the past or have debated with me and all that, know that I'm not a big Jameis Winston fan. And when I say that, I'm not talking about the man. I'm sure he's a great person. I'm talking about it in terms of football play. He is an extremely talented quarterback and just an extremely talented, skilled athlete. I mean, the things that he did in Florida State, winning a national championship, putting that team on his back, going pretty much almost going 2 years without losing a game until he finally lost in the college football playoff, which was the first college football playoff ever, I might add, to Marcus Mariota and the Oregon Ducks, who then went on to lose to Ohio State in the finals. He did some phenomenal things in college, and that's why he was drafted number 1 overall. But as everybody that studies the NFL knows that college, your talent will take you far. Your talent will take you really all the way to the promised land. Once you get to the NFL, that completely changes because everyone around you is just as talented, if not more talented. So then it comes into your IQ, your decision making. How are you as a leader? How do you adapt to situations? How do you adapt to learning new playbooks? How do you adapt to defenses? Or if you're a defensive player, offenses. The problem I have with Jameis Winston is he's too loose with the football. He makes awful decisions. One thing I know is if you're a scout or if you're a GM or if you're a coach, you want to pull your hair out at night when you have a quarterback that makes some of the decisions that Jameis Winston makes. It just destroys you as a football team. It puts your defense in a terrible situation, and it's really hard to overcome. And that's what showed last year with the Bucs. I mean, the Bucs were talented. Jameis was putting up some crazy offensive numbers, but he was putting them up crazy offensive numbers in a bad way too. All right? The quickest way you're going to find yourself on the bench in the NFL as a quarterback is by throwing interception after interception because of terrible decisions that you make. And that's what Jameis has been doing as his time as an NFL quarterback. And that's why Tampa didn't re-sign him. You know, you can overcome that in college and still win. You can't overcome that in the NFL. So the reason why I give him a B plus, though, because I'm saying all these negative things, it's like, why are you giving it a B plus? It's because I'm grading the Saints here. Okay? I give the Saints the B plus because it's a perfect situation all around. You know, if you look at the past 2 years with Drew Brees, he's lost a lot of his arm power, his accuracy as the years go on into the playoffs. It's happened 2 years in a row now, and because of that trend and because of his age and because that's just what happens, Father Time cannot be beaten, it's probably going to happen this year too. And with Teddy Bridgewater leaving, Taysom Hill is clearly not the answer. Now, I just went on about how I think Taysom Hill is an awesome NFL player as a Swiss Army knife. He's not a quarterback. If he was a quarterback, they wouldn't go out and sign Jameis Winston. They're telling us in the signing right here. They love using Taysom Hill the way they use him because it works, and it works perfectly. Once you start putting Taysom Hill under center every single down, and other defenses are actually all week game planning for Taysom Hill, that's going to change the productivity that he's having. So, you bring in Jameis Winston. If Drew Brees gets hurt again, then you have Jameis Winston with an extremely offensive coach in Sean Payton. And when you put those two together, Jameis will be able to learn. Jameis will be able to learn. He'll be able to read defenses better. And hopefully that will limit his turnovers. It just works out perfect. That's why it's a B+. They don't have a true starting backup quarterback behind Brees, but they have someone that can take the pressure off of Jameis. So Jameis doesn't have to play every single snap. They can bring Taysom Hill to mix in and keep the defense off their toes, and then they bring Jameis Winston back in to throw those darts and those snipers that he can throw. And Jameis can move too, you know? He can be an athletic quarterback when he wants to be. So the biggest reason why I gave it a B+ is because they have Sean Payton. And I know I've been saying it in the last two segments, but he's one of the smartest offensive coaches in the National Football League, and he will help Jameis out. He will make Jameis a better decision maker. He will make Jameis be able to read defenses better, and I think it's a perfect situation in that role. Because even if he doesn't get playing time, and, you know, we all want Drew Brees to stay healthy all year. He's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game. We want him to go out, if this is his last year, which he said it is, in a positive note. We don't want him to get healthy at all. So if he does play all year and Jameis doesn't get to see the field, then he just gets to sit back and learn from not only one of the greatest head coaches on the offensive side of the ball, but also from one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. And that will teach him so much going forward. It was very smart by Jameis to take this contract with the Saints, and it was very smart by the Saints to sign Jameis. B+ to the Saints for signing Jameis Winston. Now, I was pretty generous there, right? Let's go to Nick Foles. Not so much on this one, friends. I give this a D. I'm sorry, I'm not very high on Nick Foles as a starting quarterback. I never have been. I think the playoff run that he had with the Eagles was magical. The stars aligned. He caught lightning in a bottle, and it was a fantastic roller coaster, and he had the best roster in the league around him. And it just worked out perfect. Doug Peterson, I think, deserves the most credit for that Super Bowl run. He was able to shrink down the playbook to where it fits Nick Foles best. He went back and looked at how Nick Foles did so well under Chip Kelly and what the plays they used there. And he ran the quarterback option. He ran a college system for Nick Foles, and it worked out perfect. And to Nick Foles' credit, he put on one of the best Super Bowl performances I've seen, and he went head-to-head with Tom Brady for all 4 quarters, and he beat Tom Brady out. And credit is deserved where credit is deserved, and that's why he got that $88 million contract from the Jaguars, and he deserved every single piece of that because that's what the market offered him. And he deserved it. And I'm always for players getting their money, and I'm so happy he got it. But I was someone that last offseason saying I wouldn't have done that if I was the GM of the Jaguars. Because I don't think Nick Foles will ever be able to repeat that. I also don't think Nick Foles will ever be in a as good of situation as he was that year with the Eagles. That roster was perfect, best roster in the league. Doug Peterson was a great head coach for him. He definitely deserves the credit from that Super Bowl run. But in the NFL, you're paying a player for what they're going to give you in the future. And I think that he got paid for what he did in the past and not what he's going to do in the future. So, I don't like the Bears bringing in Nick Foles. I wish they would have brought in another quarterback because they do need to bring in a quarterback. And that's honestly why I didn't give it an F. Because the Bears needed to bring in a quarterback to challenge Mitchell Trubisky. Trubisky is on the hot seat. He had an awful year last year. He had a really good rookie year. And I will give Trubisky credit, and it needs to be said, it's not said enough. He was injured for a lot of, and he playing through that shoulder injury for a lot of last year. I think he's a much better quarterback than he showed. I think he's a little bit in between from year 1 and year 2. He's not as good as he was year 1. He's not as bad as he was year 2. But he needed to be challenged. So that's why they brought in a quarterback. But I just don't think they needed to bring in an $88 million quarterback in Nick Foles. But this will tell us, is Mitchell Trubisky the quarterback of the future? Who's going to be able to win that QB competition? Because if Mitchell Trubisky won't be able to beat out Nick Foles, then I think they have their answer. And I understand why the Bears did that. So a D for the Chicago Bears bringing in Nick Foles. Let's go to Marcus Mariota. All right, so I give this a C+. C+ to the Las Vegas Raiders, baby. That's right. I got it right for once. I thought I was for sure going to say the Oakland Raiders. I know I did that with San Diego Chargers when they moved to LA for the longest time. But I got it right. C+ to the Las Vegas Raiders for signing Marcus Mariota. I give this one a C+, and let me just tell you, I'm a huge Marcus Mariota fan. I loved him when he was in Oregon. I loved it when he went to Tennessee, and I thought he actually did a pretty good job with Tennessee. He had a lot of really good seasons. He went 9-7 a couple years. He won a couple playoff games against Alex Smith and the Chiefs. He showed that he can be a quarterback in the NFL. Now, he has some limited, he definitely has some limitations as a quarterback, I'll say. His arm is not the strongest. His accuracy is not the best. But overall, he's a good football player. He knows how to play the position. And the reason I give it a C+ is because Derek Carr needs to be tested. Derek Carr looked like he was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the league back in 2016 when he became runner-up to Matt Ryan for MVP. And then he ended up breaking his leg at the end of that season. And since then, something has just been off. Something's been a little bit off about it. And he hasn't been able to get back to pure form. And they brought in Derek Carr. They brought in Marcus Mariota because they wanted to challenge Derek Carr, but I don't think they wanted someone that might beat him out for the job. Does that make sense? See, I think Cam Newton would have fit perfect with the Raiders. Cam Newton in the black and silver in Las Vegas with that offense, big tight ends, big receivers. It would have been a very good fit. But I think that the Raiders do really like Derek Carr. And I think that they knew if they brought in Cam Newton, it would put too much pressure on Carr. Carr might fold, and Cam Newton will win that job. Marcus Mariota is the perfect backup quarterback to bring in. He will be a great locker room presence. He will not cause any drama at all. He will support Derek Carr 100%. And that's what Derek Carr needs to get back to his old self, which I believe he still can, and I think John Gruden and Mike Mayock do as well. So I give it a C+, because I love the signing. I love what they did with it. But also, at the same time, it's not the best quarterback if something does happen to Derek Carr, or if Derek Carr, once again, is not playing up to the standards. Marcus Mariota is not going to do much different. Moving on, Phillip Rivers. Phillip Rivers. This is my favorite signing of the offseason. I give an A to the Indianapolis Colts for signing Phillip Rivers. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, this is it. Why is Phillip Rivers playing? He looked awful last year. He should retire. I agree that he's definitely closer to being done than he is getting started. And I bet you he might only have 1 year left, and this might be his last year. But there was not a better situation for Phillip Rivers to go to than with the Indianapolis Colts. If you go back and look at Phillip Rivers' career, look at it. The game is changing. These quarterbacks now, they're becoming more athletic. You're able to move around in the pocket and outside of the pocket. That's not what Phillip Rivers can do. Phillip Rivers is not that type of quarterback anymore. Or he never was. Phillip Rivers has to sit in the pocket, and then when he's at his best is when he has time and when he has receivers around him and tight ends around him. The Indianapolis Colts will have the best offensive line in the league, if not the second or third best this year. He's going to have time. Then he's going to have Marlon Mack and Nyheim Hines in the backfield. Marlon Mack can run the ball. Nyheim Hines is a great switchback pass catcher where he can drop it off to Nyheim when he gets in trouble. He'll have T.Y. Hilton for the deep ball. The Colts are extremely talented on both sides of the ball, and this is the best fit for Phillip Rivers. Not to mention Frank Wright is their head coach. Frank Wright is a genius of an offensive head coach. He was on that staff with Doug Peterson when they went to the Super Bowl and won with Nick Foles. He's been on the staff back in San Diego when Phillip was there, so they know each other. And he's going to put Phillip in some great positions. And he'll draw up some really good plays for Phillip. And then another reason why I give it an A is the AFC South is going to be downward trend. Okay? We'll see what happens with Tennessee and Ryan Tannehill. We'll see if Ryan Tannehill's magic can keep up and do what he did last year. But I think Houston's going to make a dip. They'll still be good because they have a great quarterback in Deshaun Watson. But they just traded away one of the best receivers in the league. You can't be as good as you were the year before when you do that. They lost a lot of big pieces. And I think Jacksonville is also, that they're tanking for Trevor. They're tanking for Trevor Lawrence. So the Colts have every reason to have a great season and to win the AFC South. And I think that they're going to do it with Phillip Rivers as their quarterback. I love the signing of Phillip Rivers. And it's a 1-year deal. So if things don't work out, he's gone. He's done after this. Ryan Tannehill re-signing with the Tennessee Titans. Give it a C-. Tannehill was awesome to watch last year. He caught fire. He was one of the best storylines of the season. I was actually a big fan of Tannehill when he was in Miami. I think that he got kind of shorted there. They didn't have the best weapons around him, and he had some injury issues. That's why I give it a C-. I'm worried about his injury issues, and they have no backup quarterback. And also, I just don't know if he'll be able to do what he did last year. Last year was special. They have A.J. Brown, who had a phenomenal rookie year. Derrick Henry was the main heart and soul of that team. And they really do have a fantastic head coach in Mike Vrabel. And they'll have a good defense as well, especially if they go out and sign Jadeveon Clowney, which would be a great fit. But the question is, the reason why they got so hot, the playoffs, it was all about Derrick Henry. But Ryan Tannehill got them to that moment. Ryan Tannehill got them in the playoffs. Ryan Tannehill was one of the best quarterbacks in the second half of the season. I don't know if he can put up those numbers again. It worries me, and it's a very big contract for someone with injury history and someone that really hasn't had any good years, any special years other than the one last year. Again, love Ryan Tannehill as a player. I think he's so fun to watch, but there's a lot of questions that come with it, and giving him a 4-year, $30 million deal because he had a half of a really good season is risky. We'll see what happens. C- to the Indianapolis Colts for signing Ryan Tannehill. Teddy Bridgewater. I give the Carolina Panthers a B+ on this. I love Teddy Bridgewater. I think he was a fantastic quarterback at Louisville. He came in last pick of the draft, first round by the Minnesota Vikings. He took them to the playoffs, and then he had one of the worst injuries we've seen in football. And he fought back, and he went and took his deal with the Saints. And Drew Brees got hurt, and he took him 5-0. And he proved that he can still be that quarterback that he was trending up to be with the Vikings before he got hurt. I love the deal by the Panthers. They bring in Matt Rule, who is a football coach. And what do I mean by when I say football coach? He is a coach that just loves to coach the X's and O's of football, and he's a leader of men. He's shown that by what he did with Temple and then what he did with Baylor in his college years. Now, he is new to the NFL, and that's why I didn't give this an A, because I think it's going to take some time. But Teddy is the perfect quarterback for Matt Rule because Matt Rule needs someone that will listen. Then they bring in Joe Brady, the offensive QB coach that was at LSU last year, that did a fantastic job with Joe Burrow. Joe Brady and Teddy Bridgewater together is a special tandem. I love the signing with Christian McCaffrey there. DJ Moore looks like a special receiver. Curtis Samuel's getting better by the year. This is going to be a good team moving forward. It might take some time, but I like the signing of Teddy Bridgewater. Give it a B+. Then we have Cam Newton and the Patriots. I told you guys in the beginning, I love the signing. And for that reason, I give it an A. The Patriots and the Colts both get A's from Professor Kayvon. I give it an A because everything that I said earlier in the show. He's got a chip on his shoulder. You got him for so cheap. You never can get a former MVP for that cheap. The only reason why I didn't give this an A+ is because they don't have the weapons that can help him out. They have the running game. They have the blocking scheme, and that will help. But they don't have the weapons, and that could hurt him a bit. But all in all, I think it's a great signing. I think he'll come in with a chip on his shoulder. I think he'll come in ready to work, ready to do the Patriot way, and I think he's going to show up and show out, and I think he will have a great season for the New England Patriots, and that is why the New England Patriots get an A for signing Cam Newton. I do want to do one more, and this wasn't really a signing. This was more of it was a signing. It's Dak Prescott signing the franchise tag for the Dallas Cowboys. I give this an A+ for the Cowboys. And this is why. The Cowboys screwed this up because they signed everyone else other than their most important piece, which is a QB, before the QB. They signed everyone else. And that gave Dak time to say, I want more money. But now you have him on a 1-year deal. And he has all the weapons around him that he needs to win. He has a new head coach. He is in place to have a special season. He'll have a great offensive line again. The defense will be better. It won't be great, but it will be better. CeeDee Lamb comes in with Amari Cooper, with Michael Gallup, with Zeke Elliott. He has everything he needs to win. If he wins, then he deserves the contract that he wants. If he does not at least make the NFC Championship game, then you can walk. You will have that ability because you only have him on a 1-year deal and you put him in place to be perfectly successful. They should win the NFC East with no issues. They should win a couple playoff games with no issues. And I think that they should have the talent to make it to the Super Bowl and even win the Super Bowl if Dak shows up. And now he's in perfect position to show that he can. And time will tell for all of these. That was Grading the Franchises by Professor Kayvon. I hope you guys enjoyed the segment. I know I had a lot of fun doing it. I know I had a lot of fun thinking about it. And I thought it would be something cool, something different. So I definitely hope you enjoyed it. This was the GSMC Football Podcast. I thank you all for listening. This GSMC Football Podcast is brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I really hope you enjoyed it. Thank you and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.